Stand Up.
Is it Thursday already? Welcome to Stand Up. I have got a great conversation with the always awesome David Rothkopf joining me. That begins at 26 minutes. I've also got your headlines and clips. I'm going to jump right into them. I am headed down to Florida today, where I'll be hanging out with the amazing people at the Florida Education Association, and I'll be giving a talk, a bit of a performance tomorrow night and Saturday morning, moderating a panel of amazing union leaders, including Becky Pringle, who's the president of the National Education Association, Fed Ingram, who's the American Federation of Teachers Secretary-Treasurer, AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer, president of the Education Minnesota organization, and president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers. It's going to be a really interesting panel. Very much excited. Looking forward to that this weekend. Next week is Climate Week in New York, so I'm going to be doing some good shows around that. A busy couple of weeks, and then back out on the road for the Swing State Tour. So stay tuned for all of that, and thank you so much for your support along the way. I cannot do it without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick right now if you are not already a paid subscriber. All right, well, it is Thursday. I'll host a hangout from my hotel room in Orlando because that's how committed I am. Well, so look forward to it every week. Hated missing it last week, although we did hang out around the debate. But I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight. The link should be emailed to all paid subscribers. If you don't get it, or you're one of the few people who I've agreed to pay me outside of Patreon, that is a possibility, then you can request it through an email. I almost every week send it out to several other people. standupwithpete@gmail.com if you're looking for an alternative payment way, and how to join us at the always amazing Hangouts. All right, let's get to what happened yesterday. It's time for your headlines, the best news recap in any daily podcast anywhere around, according to me. All right, let's do it. Let's start with the big news out of the Fed. I mean, I think that's got to be the biggest story yesterday, is that interest rates are finally being brought down. The Federal Reserve said it was lowering its key interest rate by 0.5 percentage point, an unusually aggressive move designed to cushion the economy from a further slowdown. And announcing the rate cut, the central bank noted job gains had slowed while inflation had made further progress toward its 2% goal. And here's a little audio. I'll get it to you early. This is Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed.
My first question is, very simply, what message are you trying to send American consumers, the American people, with this unusually large rate cut?
I would just say that, the U.S. economy is in a good place, and our decision today is designed to keep it there. More specifically, the economy is growing at a solid pace. Inflation is coming down closer to our 2% objective over time. And the labor market is still in solid shape. So our intention is really to maintain the strength that we currently see in the U.S. economy. And we'll do that by returning rates from their high level, which has really been the purpose of which has been to get inflation under control. We're going to move those down over time to a more normal level. Over time.
A quick follow-up to that. Listening to you talk about inflation moving meaningfully down to 2%, is the Federal Reserve effectively declaring a decisive victory over inflation and rising prices?
No, we're not. So inflation, what we say is we want inflation. The goal is to have inflation move down to 2% on a sustainable basis. And, we're not really, we're close, but we're not really at 2%. And I think we're going to want to see it be, around 2% and close to 2% for some time. But we're certainly not we're not saying mission accomplished or anything like that. But I have to say, though, we're encouraged by the progress that we have made.
There you go. That is the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell with a riveting press conference yesterday about interest rate cuts. Kamala Harris praised the Federal Reserve rate cut as welcome news. She said, while this announcement is welcome news for Americans who have borne the brunt of high prices, my focus is on the work ahead to keep bringing prices down. Touted her economic proposals. The disgraced former president suggested that the Federal Reserve's decision to cut interest rates by 0.5 point is politically motivated, as did a whole bunch of other Republicans. And while the timing of the cut could seem like the Fed is assisting Vice President Kamala Harris' bid for the White House by easing financial burdens Americans are currently shouldering right before they cast their votes, the central bank makes its decisions irrespective of the political calendar. Jerome Powell went on to say, we never use our tools to support or oppose a political party, a politician, or any political outcome. Even Kevin Hassett, who served as chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors when Trump was president, said in an interview last week on PBS, quote, there's been a whole bunch of bad data coming out, and I think the prudent Fed would start to risk manage by cutting rates now. It's unfortunate that it's before an election because of the appearance of partisanship, but there you have it. Some of the reaction to the politics of it all. And now to the other headlines I've got for you. In Lebanon, a second wave of device explosions hit the country yesterday, killing 14, injuring 450 others, igniting blazes across the country a day after hundreds of pagers belonging to Hezbollah members detonated in an unprecedented attack on the militant group. Lebanon's Red Cross said it deployed 30 ambulances across southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley in response to the walkie-talkie explosions. I dig more into that with David Rothkopf during our conversation today. A Ukrainian drone attack on a Russian missile facility early Wednesday threw up towering fireballs visible from space and thundering detonations and triggered earthquake monitors. Even by the standards of this incendiary conflict, videos showing the blasts north of Moscow made for remarkable footage. On the other hand, the attack came just hours after Russian military claimed to have captured the town of Ukrinsk as Moscow continues a slow but steady advance in eastern Ukraine. Now let's come back home where in Baltimore, the Justice Department is suing the owner and operator of the ship that crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge. In labor news, Boeing said it would temporarily lay off tens of thousands of employees to stem losses from a walkout by the machinists union. And a legendary name brand has filed for bankruptcy. Tupperware Brands, after struggling for years with declining sales and increasing competition. But we're still going to call plastic Tupperware, aren't we? At least my generation. New study saying that adults under 50 have been developing cancer at increasingly higher rates. Scientists think alcohol may be one factor driving the trend. In the car business news and manufacturing, owners of electric cars and pickup trucks. How about this news for EV owners? Owners of electric cars and pickup trucks made by General Motors will be able to use Tesla's extensive charging network starting yesterday. And Sean Combs is set to remain in jail until his trial for sex trafficking and racketeering, rejecting an appeal that he be released to his $28 million Miami home on bail. So he's sitting there in one of the worst prisons in New York, in Brooklyn. Just crazy to think about. And I'm not spending a lot of time thinking about it, but still thought I'd mention that in the headlines. The disgraced former president was campaigning in Long Island for some reason, probably because he can fill an arena there. He's got a lot of fans out in Long Island. It's very MAGA out there. And he said all kinds of crazy shit, including there's a 75% chance a kid riding the New York subway will go missing. I mean, he'll say anything. He said that he'll win New York State, which he lost by 23 points twice, but he said they're going to win. Rudy Giuliani was there screaming as well. It was crazy. He also suggested migrants will try to kill him and that you may never see him again. I mean, it's just a really wild rally, and it's only, I think, probably going to get a lot worse in the next 45 days or so. So buckle in and stay with me, folks. I'll be here for you every day, I hope. I mean, that is if the Florida MAGAs don't get me, you might never see me again. And there were unfounded rumors of claims of explosives at Trump's Long Island rally. Elon Musk and Marjorie Taylor Greene amplified the false bomb threats. So, like I said, things are going to get crazy, and we're going to be here every day trying to understand, analyze it, and remind you of reality and where we are here on Earth One, while also working to get Kamala Harris elected and maintain some sense of sanity and reality. And I guess the other big story yesterday, I'll bookend it with big stories, the news segment headlines here, is that yesterday Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, suffered an embarrassing loss, another one, as his bill to stop the government shutdown failed. The bill, which would extend government funding for 6 months at current levels, failed. 14 Republicans voted against it, and 3 Democrats voting for it. Democratic leaders in both chambers have been pushing a clean 3-month spending extension, but they're not getting it, of course. The pressure is on for Mike Johnson to cough up his next move, with questions mounting whether he'll now embrace a bipartisan solution with fewer than 2 weeks to go before government funding runs out. All right, well, those are the headlines, and now I want to get to the rest of the audio I've got for you. It's time for some clips. I thought this was interesting. The beginning of Chris Hayes' show on MSNBC, All In, where, of course, he opens talking about the big news, the Federal Reserve. He talked about what it means for the Biden administration, this comeback from COVID and inflation coming down. And then he pivoted to Trump's solutions and his main economic proposal, which is new taxes for everybody, making everything cost more. It's a pretty wild scenario when you think about it and break it down. And I thought this was really good from Chris Hayes last night and wanted to share it.
Chris Hayes, we are so back. This afternoon, Federal Chair Reserve Jerome Powell took the stage to announce the Fed's first cut in interest rates since 2020 and the beginning of the pandemic recession. And it was a big one, a 0.5% interest rate reduction to stimulate borrowing and to boost the job market. An acknowledgement that inflation has been tamed without a recession or high unemployment. In other words, the economy's landing has been soft, and America has beaten back the nearly unprecedented economic challenges of the global pandemic and the ensuing disruption to the economy. It's huge news. It's also proof the Biden economic recovery has been truly nothing short of miraculous, especially given the mess he inherited from Donald Trump and the fact the U.S. has outperformed every other country on earth. Trump, like so many Republicans before him, has enjoyed a polling advantage with voters over Democrats on the economy. Though that may be changing. Multiple national and swing state polls in recent weeks suggesting Vice President Kamala Harris is closing that gap and possibly even leading Trump on economic issues. Now, Harris has probably been helped by Trump's inability to even feign caring about the expenses of regular Americans, like, for instance, child care, as he proved earlier this month with that rambling answer to a direct question at the Economic Club in New York. It was mockable word salad, but with one really, really undernoticed but truly toxic ingredient that deserves much more attention.
Then Chris Hayes plays that clip of Trump with the word salad, and I'm just going to skip ahead to what that big, important detail is.
Okay, so Trump very obviously has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, clearly has no plan for child care. Child care is child care. But there is something in that answer that truly is a plan. And it's something he is both serious about and obsessed with. Okay? Listen to this. Donald Trump's central economic policy platform in this campaign is to raise taxes by trillions and trillions of dollars. He just said it. Taxes that will be paid primarily by you, by working people, in the form of a sales tax on imported goods. That is his magic bullet, his obsession, an enormous trillion-dollar sales tax on imported goods. Except that's not what he calls it, right? He calls it a tariff. And Donald Trump loves tariffs.
It'll be interesting to see, that's Chris Hayes, of course. It'll be interesting to see how others interpret this in media. I thought that was a very interesting recap of how far we've come, what this Federal Reserve rate cut means, and what Trump's economic proposal, main one, the only one he's able to really talk about, which is a terrible idea, according to the vast, vast majority of economists. All right, let's move back to Washington, D.C., where Congress was back in session, Republicans running the House majority there and doing all they can to destroy the country day after day by not doing anything and by proposing bullshit legislation that never goes anywhere, has no chance of passing. But alas, here we are. This week, the ridiculous strategy has brought us to the introduction of something called anti-woke bills, 3 of them. The End Woke Higher Education Act, the Protecting Americans' Investments from Woke Policies Act, and the Prioritizing Economic Growth Over Woke Policies Act. Republican leaders have queued up a number of these bills. They're just for messaging to, quote, combat wokeness in the federal government. It's really preposterous because they get nothing done. And this is further proof that they will get nothing done in Congress that will help the American people. Here is yesterday Republican Congresswoman Erin Houchin introducing this and James McGovern reacting appropriately, the Democrat reacting appropriately.
This woke mind virus doesn't stop there. Which brings me to H.R. 5339, the Protecting American Investments from Woke Policies Act.
All right, who cares? But here is James McGovern responding to it appropriately.
Democrats want to make sure that our kids go to college and get a good education that prepares them for the workforce. And instead of working with us, Republicans go on and on about woke this and woke that in our schools. Apparently anyone who wants to teach facts is woke nowadays. They want colleges to stop being, quote, woke, even though they can't quite define what that even means. It's all political BS, Mr. Speaker.
And yesterday there was also a committee hearing on border security. Here is what Congressman Daniel Goldman, Democrat of New York, had to say about that.
And let me just say something about the asylum process, because there's a lot of talk about legal immigration and illegal immigration. Asylum is legal immigration. It is not illegal immigration. It is part of our laws that you may seek asylum under certain circumstances. The problem we have at the border and the problem we have with our asylum process is that only 20 to 25% of people who apply for asylum ultimately get asylum. But it takes 7 to 10 years for that process to play out. This border security bill would have dramatically shortened the asylum process such that it would be over in 6 months. And the incentive for someone who knows that they do not qualify for asylum to come across the border would be eliminated. And many of those 75 to 80% of people who are not eligible for asylum would not come here and would not be granted work permits.
All right. Well, that's Daniel Goldman laying it out for you. And then we head over to the House floor where the minority leader, hopefully the next Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, talked about the history of government shutdowns. We could be on the precipice of a government shutdown here. And I think it's not getting nearly enough coverage because J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are trying to out crazy each other every day. But yesterday, the House defeated a $1.6 trillion stopgap spending bill to extend current government funding into March and impose new proof of citizenship requirements on voter registration as Republicans and Democrats alike rejected Speaker Mike Johnson's proposal to avert a shutdown at the end of the month. Here's Hakeem Jeffries with a history of Republican efforts of doing this. And it's always Republicans doing this. They're never fair in their negotiations. And, of course, that doesn't get much attention either.
This is a shutdown effort. That's not hype. That's not hysteria. That's not hyperbole. It's history. Because in the DNA of extreme MAGA Republicans has consistently been an effort to make extreme ransom demands of the American people. And if those extreme ransom demands are not met, you shut down the government. That's history. In the 1990s, extreme MAGA Republicans shut down the government because they were determined to end Medicaid as we know it. In 2013, extreme MAGA Republicans shut the government down for 14 days. And the demand at that point was to repeal President Obama's signature legislative accomplishment, the Affordable Care Act, that benefits more than 100 million Americans. In 2018 and 19, extreme MAGA Republicans shut the government down for a record 35 days. What was the ransom demand in that particular moment? Well, the former president and Republicans in the House and the Senate demanded that the American taxpayer fund Trump's ineffective medieval border wall, notwithstanding the fact that the promise was clearly made that Mexico would pay for that wall. And because we were defending taxpayer interests, you shut the government down for 35 days. And so the notion that we're here today facing another extreme MAGA Republican-driven shutdown, concerned about it, the only thing standing between a shutdown and the American people, not hype, not hysteria, not hyperbole, not a hypothetical, it's history.
There you go, Hakeem Jeffries. Well said. I like that history lesson right there. And now here is Congressman Robert Garcia, also at this committee hearing on immigration yesterday. He's a Democrat from California, and he had this to say about, well, I think it's self-explanatory.
Instead of actually discussing that, of course, he went, the former president, on what I consider a kind of strange rant about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. And I want to repeat what actually Donald Trump said. This is a quote. "They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats." Continuing, "They're eating the pets of the people that live here. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame." Now, I'm a cat owner and an immigrant. I take the safety and security of our pets very seriously. But this notion that Haitian immigrants are eating pets is not only xenophobic, in my opinion, but has caused real harm to the people of Springfield, Ohio. Now, the Republican governor of the state, the Republican mayor of Springfield have testified about it, and they agree that this story was not true. Even the woman who created the original Facebook post, which started the rumor, has disavowed and made up the story. And in fact, today it was reported that she's actually apologizing for what she said.
All right, Congressman Robert Garcia, the clip cuts off there. Sorry about that. But I did tweet about his testimony yesterday at that committee hearing because he's really very effective communicator. And what I said was in relation to the fact that he actually used one of the Republican props. You may have seen this floating around social media if you pay attention to social media. Otherwise, you didn't. But he used one of the Republican props that tried to a chart that Republicans were using in this hearing that supposedly charted illegal immigration into the U.S. as to when it started going up under Biden. Of course, it started going up under Trump, but he was ready for it. And it was a fascinating moment. You have to see it. You can't really hear it. But my point is that these Democrats, they're just not the ones that we grew up with. The ones that I covered when even President Obama was in office. And I think it's a really important point. This generation of House Democrats constantly impresses me. I could name after name after name who are amazing, effective communicators. And Robert Garcia dismantled these Republican liars with their own prop. He took their prop and pointed out why it was wrong. And it was just so effective. And I actually tweeted that out. And Congressman Garcia liked it. So you're welcome, sir. All right. I also wanted to share this with you from a conversation on CNN yesterday. They were talking about Sarah Huckabee's very ugly comments that she made at a town hall with the disgraced former president, where everybody's interpretation was pretty much the same, that she was referring to a woman's worth, meaning somehow that they had to have kids. It depended on that. Just as a reminder or for context of the conversation on CNN, here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders' very brief clip of her comments.
So my kids keep me humble. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris doesn't have anything keeping her humble.
All right, there you go. Now let's head over to CNN's The Lead with Jake Tapper, where CNN is able to continue to find Trump-supporting Republicans to come on TV and disgrace themselves and everybody they've ever known in defense of the former president. And here they had the former general counsel for Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Her name is Michaela Carr. She denied that Huckabee Sanders' comments were a dig at Harris's familial situation. But I really like the response from another Republican strategist and bulwark publisher, Sarah Longwell, on that. Here is a minute and a half of that conversation reaction to Sarah Huckabee Sanders' comments.
Just as a representative of the corporate media here, can I just ask a question? Do you really think Governor Huckabee Sanders made that comment thinking that we wouldn't cover it the next day?
You know, I heard the comment and I listened to it because it was pointed out. Yeah. I think what came before that was a woman talking about wanting to fight for her family and fight for her children and trying to stay humble. And there was a transition there when she then went and talked about...
You really don't think she was trying to point out that Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, doesn't have biological children?
I don't think that that's how people think. I don't. And I didn't hear that until it was told to me that this is how we're going to discuss it, which, of course, I've seen on TV all day. But what she followed it up with was the failed policies of the Biden-Harris administration, which I think Sarah points out really well. She is running from, and almost successfully.
And nobody's taking issue with that part of her remarks. Sarah, is the corporate media, are we being unfair here?
No, and I think that part of it, so first of all, I don't know how you can interpret her comments any other way. But more importantly than that, it's not two comments. J.D. Vance has been going on every weird Bro podcast to make sure to talk about not just childless cat ladies. That's almost the funny part, but also that women in abusive relationships should stay in those relationships. The way that they defend people like Laura Loomer, who are talking about how if Kamala Harris is in the White House, it's going to smell like curry. This has become the way that they are currently terrorizing the people of Springfield with their racist smear about eating dogs and cats. Like, this is the most vicious, despicable, lie-filled campaign I have ever seen. And that is comparing it to what was a pretty significantly indecent campaign that Donald Trump ran in 16 and 20.
The guy making no effort to tone down the rhetoric is J.D. Vance. Earlier today, Vance spoke. Get it up and out. You'll feel better. Today, he spoke at a rally in Michigan where he pushed his hateful lie about Haitian immigrants without really knowing where they're from.
What happened in Springfield, I think, is an example of what Kamala Harris's open border, what she wants to do to every small town and big city in this country, which is over the last few years, 20,000 migrants, primarily from Haiti, have been dropped into Springfield, Ohio.
That's right. That's right. Haitians come from Haiti, much in the same way that lesbians come from Lesbia. And Donald Trump comes from dementia.
All right. Well, that's all I've got for you in the headlines and clips section of the show. But now I've got a great conversation with my friend David Rothkopf. I try not to miss a week of talking to him, but I think it's been almost 3 weeks. I haven't talked to him since, well, before the debate. So I had to get my fix. And if you want more, go to Need to Know by David Rothkopf. That's his Substack. It's really great. Check that out, davidrothkopf.substack.com. Listen to all of the podcasts over at Deep State Radio, which is an amazing lineup of great podcasts. Get his books, follow him on social media, and let him know that you heard him here on the show. Always love our conversations. And this one was no exception. We covered a lot. Let's do it right now with Rothkopf. I have missed you. David Rothkopf. No. You're back. You went on a little trip. You're back.
I'm back. I missed you too, Pete.
You drove to Michigan where your in-laws are. You wrote about this in yet another fascinating piece in your Substack. Need to Know. What were you doing and what did you experience on this trip in terms of your understanding of how the social fabric of America is working?
I discovered a number of things that you and I have talked about in the past, which I think you've seen, which is you get outside of the New York metropolitan area, you get outside of the Beltway, and the complexion of the country changes a lot. That's always been true. In Washington, if you're driving from Washington to Michigan, you go up by 270, you get on I-70 past Fredericksburg, and all of a sudden it starts being farmland. And then you're on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And then everywhere there's trucks and barns and big signs that say Trump. And then you get into Ohio, there's more of that. And the same is true in Michigan outside of Detroit and Ann Arbor, that where the Michigan militia lives, it's a combination of signs like that and advertisements for AR-15s. And you realize there's a cultural division in the country and bumper stickers indicate that and so forth. But on this trip, in the areas that were not the Trumpiest, far more yard signs, far more bumper stickers, far more enthusiasm than I'd seen in the past for Democratic candidate for Harris and Walz. And even in the other areas, there's a little bit more activity in that regard. Some of the Trump signs and trucks and so forth look like they've been there for a few years and they're getting a little weather worn. And I think so is Trump. So is the whole Trump shtick. It gets tired. This is the third campaign we've listened to. Right. Immigrants will destroy us. It's the end of the world. Only I can save you. And you would think that one among the many people trying to get some of his bucks would say to him, hey, boss, we need some new material. But it's not happening.
So getting into the campaign, you've just been traveling. It's always good, as you said, to get outside and around the other half, the rest of us. It's not that many. It's not half of Americans that support Trump, right? What do you think when you hear half, we're divided half? I mean, in certain states, I guess it matters, but that's not the case, is it?
It's not. First of all, only about half of eligible voters vote. And of that half, there is a sort of division between the super Trump loyalists, or maybe half again of the GOP side of it. So that's a fraction of a fraction. And right now, Trump's got about 45% to 49% of the electorate on his side. But that's only 25% of voting adults, right? And some of them are on the fence, and some of them are lying to pollsters. Some of them are saying it because that's what their neighbors want them to say.
How much are you thinking about polls at this point with 49 days left? Where should we be paying attention to? Should we be just not thinking about it at all and pretending, as I have been, no matter what those polls say, that we're always 10 points down?
I think that's a healthy attitude that all of us should internalize because it keeps us working. But I think there's smart ways to look at the polling data and not so smart ways. I think the smart way is to, first of all, know what polls are just nonsense, right? Rasmussen and so forth, or Trafalgar, some of these polls that are just made up. Name
me some of the reliable sources that you, David Rothkopf, will look to and suggest. Is that a fair question? And
I think it is. But first of all, what I was going to say was, then you get rid of the ones that are unreliable and then look at the trends among the ones that are more reliable as opposed to any one particular poll, because any one particular poll can be an outlier. Morning Consult is pretty reliable poll. Monmouth polls are pretty reliable polls. The Harris polls that Mark Penn does are pretty unreliable polls. He's in the tank for Trump. You start to sort them out. Go to 538. Don't go to Real Clear Politics because that has a thumb on the scale already. But go to some place like 538. Look at the polls and don't look at any individual number, but look at the trends. Right now, the trend is that Harris was doing well, better than Biden, had a small lead, did the debate, and now the lead is somewhat larger. Some polls have it 1 or 2 points larger. Some polls have it 3 or 4 points larger. The biggest margins in national polls is 6 or 7% right now. That's encouraging. But the margin of error in these polls is usually 3-4%. Polls of registered voters are useless because you don't know how many are going to vote. Polls of likely voters that include under likely voters who have said they will definitely vote are good. Those who say that they might vote are not good because you just don't know. Polls are notoriously bad at picking up on the ground changes, like in 2022. They predict a red wave, but there was this big reaction to Roe v. Wade that they missed altogether. They have been undercounting Democrats in the past couple of years. And there's some people that they will always undercount. So, for example, young voters, like you, for example, say you get a phone call on your cell phone and you don't know who it's from. Do you answer it?
No.
And so most young voters aren't going to answer a cold call on their cell phone from a polling person. So we're going to get them undercounted. I say all this because that's how I look at it. But the other thing is that when I talk to the people that, the inside politics types, we do podcasts here every week or two with a sort of group of insiders, Simon Rosenberg, Tara McGowan, and Tom Bonnier. And as a result of that, a couple of years ago, we got the prediction of what was going to happen right, and the rest of the world got it wrong. And it's because those guys look at more concrete measures, like voter registrations, and who's registering and what the trend is there. Starting in a day or two, depending on when this is released, we're going to have early voting. Early voting numbers will show us whether Democrats are out in force, what that looks like. That was a huge indicator in 2022. Financial donations are an indicator of the viability of campaigns. A number of volunteers are an indication of the viability of campaigns. And so that data, much more useful than polling data. And so you've got to sort through it. And then once you do all that, then go back to your first point. Take it, internalize it, put it in a drawer, and pretend you're behind.
Exactly that. Your credibility and Simon's credibility and the others that you mentioned is why I like to talk to you, and why I like to put you out there for other folks to hear, because you also have written a piece with your confidence here, with the analysis that you've seen from yourself and all the experts. You have a piece over at your Substack, Need to Know, by David Rothkopf, who, if you ask my mother, she says she's a paid subscriber now. My mom is.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'll send you the check.
And she says when she reads your pieces, because she listens to you on her son's podcast, she actually hears your voice, your vocal tones.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or that's bad.
I told her I was sorry. That must be hard. But so
somebody, we do a podcast every morning of sort of the news, the DSR Daily.
Yeah.
And my two colleagues on it are both in their 20s. And somebody said, it's really nice to listen to them because they don't have that vocal fry that you hear from Rothkopf.
That's mean.
And it's like,
that's mean.
That's like, I can't help it.
Right. And it's just a mean thing to say. I love your voice. Yeah. You wrote this piece. Harris will win in November by more than you think. Predictions are hard, especially about the future. But honestly, not this one. Your audacity to print this out, you're jinxing it. It's how can you possibly know and feel this way, and all the other reactions that you probably are getting to this piece?
Look, I do what I just said I do, which I look at it. The trends are pro-Harris. The hard data so far is pro-Harris. Harris's campaign has met every challenge it's faced and exceeded expectations. So it has legitimate momentum. She's handled tough questions well. And simultaneously, Trump has missed every opportunity he's been presented with. He has reverted to what she calls an old, tired playbook, and she's right. He is alienating groups as he goes. J.D. Vance alienates women on a daily basis. J.D. Vance has been horrible on the issues associated with his own state, Springfield, Ohio, and immigrants, and has alienated them more. Trump has doubled down on it, has alienated them more. People like Stephen Miller speak out and say, we're going to denaturalize American citizens and deport them.
Yeah, I just heard about denaturalization. I didn't know you could do that. I would like to get that done. I'd like to transition out.
I think if Trump gets elected, they may do that for you. But they'll say, oh, this guy is 14% of Middle Eastern origin. He's gone.
Probably close to 25. And I'll be punished. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they're doing all these things that I think alienate people. And for example, during the debate, Harris was extremely good on this. Trump refused to say he supported Ukraine, refused to say he would stand up to Russia, and talk crap about NATO. And Harris said, I'm sure the 800,000 Polish voters in Pennsylvania are going to be really interested to hear that you're not going to defend Poland. And that was really deft and smart, but that's what he does. That's what they do. I think every single day that so far this campaign has gone on with Harris as the candidate, Harris has won the day every day. And Trump has, on most days, reduced his base of support. And so that's why I don't think it's impossible. Again, assume she's going to lose, work double hard. But I don't think it's impossible that she wins by a bigger margin than Biden won. And that carries over into swing states. I mean, look at the swing state polls. Not only is she winning in the crucial states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, she's got a good shot in North Carolina. She's got a decent shot in Georgia and Arizona. But there was an Iowa state poll, and remember, Trump won Iowa by 1%, in which it was within the margin of error. In Iowa, there are polls in Florida and Texas that show Democrats with a shot. which would have been absolutely impossible to believe. So, those are the reasons that I'm cautiously optimistic. And I encourage everybody who's listening to this to ignore what I'm saying.
I'm going to every swing state I can between now and Election Day as a way to just demonstrate my commitment to that idea. Pretend or act like we are 10 points down and do everything you can. I can't possibly imagine waking up on Election Day or the next day and Kamala Harris not winning and feeling like I could have done more.
And look, you and I have talked about this a million times. This is really a historical watershed for the United States. We are being given a chance to choose whether we're going to remain a democracy or not, whether we're going to remain a nation of laws or not, whether we're going to stand up against corruption and against our enemies or not. And there are 48 days left, something like 47 days left. And so what does that mean? That means if you were to vote an hour a day between now and the election, that's 2 days of your life. Is it worth 2 days of your life to ensure that the United States remains a democracy? Is it worth 2 days of your life to ensure that a criminal, rapist, racist, traitor is not the president of the United States? And that's what it's going to come down to, is whether people like your listeners say, yeah, I can give 2 days. I can say prior generations had to give their lives up. What we're being asked to do now is to give up a little time, and not very much of it.
I was working with one of the Democratic operatives and working at the Nevada Democrats with the DNC, and smart guy I was working with who, I won't say his name, he's actually a listener, he knows who he is, but he's a veteran and he served 7 years. He was on deployment, he flew Blackhawks, and he says people make fun of him or they might not agree with it. He calls it, this is a domestic deployment. That's what he says. You have to have that kind of a commitment between now and Election Day. And this is a military guy talking that way. And it made me feel very manly to be committed to the campaign because I felt like I was on deployment for the first time.
Well, that hasn't happened in a long time.
No, rarely. I built something recently that was level, and that was about 90 days ago. But yeah, no, I didn't.
IKEA? Was it IKEA?
It was. Yeah. But I got all the things correctly. And
you followed the instructions. Yeah. Now, look, I think I would take it a step further, and this may sound a little inflammatory, but it's not like a domestic deployment. You don't have to reach too far to find a national security analog. When Trump says cats and dogs are being eaten, who amplifies it? Russians, Russian misinformation specialists, Russian trolls and bots. When Trump and the sort of echo chamber.
To be clear,
of the right,
when he says that thing, those foreign entities come into our social media and pretend to be Americans, and they say it over and over to make it seem like there's a lot of
they amplify it. And that's why on the case that the DOJ brought a couple of weeks ago, they're pumping money, millions of dollars, into right-wing social media, new media outlets, because this is part of hybrid warfare. This is an active part of Russia's campaign to win what it's doing in Ukraine, to weaken its enemies, to strengthen itself on the world stage. This is hybrid warfare. We have to recognize it and take the steps to defeat them in terms of their objectives. And so there is a huge national security issue here because Donald Trump favors our enemies, doesn't like our allies, will let Ukraine die, will weaken us because our alliances are an important part of who we are, will divide America, which weakens us, and will weaken our democracy, which weakens our leadership. He is a threat to U.S. national security. So that's another reason to be out there.
You wrote Terrorism as a Campaign Strategy as the title of a piece at your Substack. And I think I did want to obviously get your take on this. I think it's just when you lie about something that's happening to scare people, And then you see the results of that, obviously, with all these bomb threats and just everything being said online, the chaos it's creating. That's fascism, right? That's a kind of, we didn't have that. It wasn't that pervasive in America where you could just make up a thing that was happening and scare the hell out of people. Ronald Reagan didn't do that.
Not on a national scale. We've seen it in the past, the Red Scare, the John Birch Society, and so forth at different times in our history. But at those times, the effort was to support a candidate within our democratic system. What Trump is trying to do is to create a national crisis environment that will allow him to say, I need to suspend the Constitution. I need to put U.S. troops in the street. I need to have authoritarian level power. And he says it. He says, I will be a dictator from day one. I like Viktor Orban. I want to be like Vladimir Putin. I wish I could be as effective as Kim Jong-un. That is fascism. And so what you've got from Trump is the worst of two worlds. In Springfield, Ohio, when he created this tension with these Haitian immigrants who are not illegal, who are welcomed into Springfield, who are constructive citizens there, he was trying to create social unrest and violence in order to, again, support this fascist impulse of his. That's terrorism. And what happened? Within days, just like his remark during the debate in 2020 about standing by, the Proud Boys were in Springfield.
Yeah.
White supremacist groups were handing out pamphlets in Springfield that were written in the type font that was used by the Nazis in 1930, this kind of old typeface, very deliberate choice to say this looks like what the Nazis handed out, referring to the Haitians as filth, right. The same words that the Nazis used for the Jews. You've got the worst tactics of Hitler supported by the worst tactics of Putin as the core of the Trump campaign.
Talk to me just about your reaction. I shouldn't have said that this is not like we haven't seen this before, because the history of America is littered with horrifying terrorism against black folks and Jewish folks about made up things. The Chinese people, Mexican, any immigrant that came in, where you could make up something about them, demonize them, divide the American people. So that's not new. I guess I was thinking when I said that about just the specific claim about cats and dogs and all these denials immediately happening from the city and the Republican mayors and governors, but they continue to say it. So it seems a bit different, and obviously,
well, it is different because of the scale, the person who's making it, and their objective. And the stated objective of the guy is to eliminate democracy as we've known it, and he needs an excuse to do that. He needs a country that's at unrest. And the reason I wrote a piece at the Daily Beast yesterday, which said that the worst political violence is ahead of us, and the worst political violence is ahead of us because Trump each day is going to see he's doing less well and is going to see that his only ticket to stay out of jail is to create more and more unrest and conflict in the United States. And that's why I expect the next 6-7 weeks are going to be awful. And if the election is close, I really fear for the period after the election.
Right. Absolutely. I do want to get your take before you leave on what happened in Israel or in Lebanon. The beepers, 2,800 pagers exploded. It was an Israeli operation. I'm fascinated. I can't stop reading about it, how this happened and what its effectiveness is. I don't know. Just what's your reaction to that operation and what it signals for the future of the conflict is probably the most important takeaway. But just the fact that they were able to do that, it just shows how much power and influence and brilliance and talent and resources and probably embedded people in Hezbollah they have, right? No?
It does. But look, I think we need to take this thing. It's easy to get caught up in the fascination with the technical achievement. Let's break it down. First of all, right now, the most dangerous place for escalation in the war in the Middle East is on the northern border of Israel, between Israel and Hezbollah. And so to take an action like this, where there are thousands of casualties and a number of dead, and that is widespread across the society, is potentially escalatory in a very dangerous way. Now, theoretically, somebody in Israel said, this is just going to be pagers and it's not going to kill a lot of people, and so it won't be that escalatory. If they did, I think that was a miscalculation, because based on the readings I'm getting out of Lebanon, it is seen as hugely provocative. Secondly, and we've got to note these things, it's against international law to kill people indiscriminately. And if you set off thousands of pagers, making them explode, when you don't know who they're going to be next to, they could be next to kids, they could be next to innocent people. While it seems like it's very controlled, it's actually not, and the results yesterday indicated that to some extent. It does create a sense that the Mossad is what we always thought they were, which is super spies with super technology. But it's important to remember one thing. Today is September 18th.
Yeah.
So in just a couple of weeks, it's going to be October 7th. It's going to be the 1-year anniversary of the attack on Israel. The attack on Israel was the biggest intelligence failure in the history of Israel. It was catastrophic. And the intelligence agencies of Israel have been struggling to get back on their feet ever since then. Flexing their muscle this way may restore a degree of what some intel colleagues that I know say are, is deterrence. But it's also provocative. It's also illegal. And we don't know where it will lead. And it comes at a moment when Netanyahu is trying to fire his defense minister, who is a more rational actor than he is, which is, not saying a great deal, and try to put into his place apparatchik, somebody will do exactly what he wants. You could look at this and say, in terms of the trends within Israel, it could signal more danger in the immediate future, not less danger.
Wow, I am very happy I asked you that question, because I really was just fascinated by it and wasn't thinking through it and hadn't read enough about it. And I appreciate that thoughtful explanation of what it means. Let's end on what I think is a positive note, which is your most recent piece, Post at Need to Know by David Rothkopf, read by Mary Dominic, paid subscriber. There's something special about...
Thank you, Mary. And all of us, thank you for Pete.
Oh, that's sweet. You wrote, there is something special about Kamala Harris and the campaign she's running. She's rising to the challenges of an extraordinarily fraught moment in U.S. history. Man, I do get a very similar, slightly different, and maybe in a way, I don't know, it's just so ominous, the stakes, feeling of when the way I felt when President Obama was taking questions. I felt that way yesterday when she was talking about, to the National Association of Black Journalists, the vice president was talking about these bomb scares and these kids, they go to school on picture day, the way that she humanizes Americans, the way that she seems to be able to relate to and talk to people at any level. And frankly, the way that she's able to have the poise and patience in these moments to be that, what do they call the empathy in chief, like that, have that real sensitivity and way to articulate herself and communicate herself in these tough moments. I'm feeling very inspired by that. But what are you saying about how special she is? And more importantly, the campaign.
I think there's every reason to think that she is unusually special. And when this campaign started out, people's first reaction was, can she recover the ground lost by Biden? Is she going to be better than Biden? And then when things started going, the question was this her honeymoon? When will this end? Every single test that she has been presented with from July 21st until now, almost 2 months, media tests, organizational tests, policy choice tests, meeting with international leaders, she's not only met the test, she's exceeded it. She has exceeded expectations. She has done a spectacular job. She's put together a great campaign. She gave a great speech at the convention. She gave a great performance at the debates. She gets massive crowds that respond to her brilliantly, but then watch her. You're a performer. Watch how she engages with the crowd, listens to them, empathizes with them. Her timing is excellent. And all of a sudden you say, whoa, this is unusual. And I think it's natural to say it's the most politician most recently like this is Obama. But honestly, I have higher hopes because I think Obama was an excellent politician and a pretty good president. But she has a lot more experience than he did when he was coming into office. She is very pragmatic. She's very strong on national security issues in a way that he was not personally. Very strong on the whole legal set of issues. Is the leading spokesperson in the United States on the issue of women's reproductive rights. The leader on that issue. The leader on guns. The leader on giving young voters of color a voice. I think, and this is what I was trying to convey in this thing, I think it's not too early to ask, is she not just a good choice to replace Biden, but is she a generational talent? So far, we won't know for a while, but so far, every single time she's been asked to deliver, she's done so at a level that at least it's reasonable to ask that right now. And obviously, the outcome of this election is going to be the first test of that. And then if she's president, we'll get many tests of that to come. But you can't look at her so far and not be blown away by how effective she's been.
I fully agree with that analysis, and I think you compare her to Obama because it's somewhat natural to do so, but it's an inappropriate comparison for the simple fact that things are so different. Everything is different. Social media is different. Trump and COVID, and obviously they're different, but it's just such a different time, David, which is why I feel like the comparison is even less fair to make.
Well, and the stakes are so high. And here's something neither you nor I have mentioned. She's a black woman. She's a black woman running for office, for the highest office in the United States. And you want to know how often that comes up? Almost never.
Yeah, there seems to be she's transcended gender and race in a way that I feel like we didn't expect. Obviously, it's still being used whenever possible. The worst of it coming from J.D. Vance, I think. And then this popular theme that it's somehow less good. You're not as good or full human or citizen if you're an adult without kids. That's a bizarre thing.
But also your ex-girlfriend, Laura Loomer, has said some bad stuff.
I'm old enough to remember when Obama had to apologize for being in Jeremiah Wright's church 20 years ago. For about 3 months, he had to make a huge speech to separate himself from that guy. And Laura Loomer accompanied Donald Trump to 9/11, which is a sacred day in space. And she said it was an inside job. It was a disgrace.
And then she said the White House would smell of curry. And then she said, if Kamala Harris was elected, she is a racist pig. And Trump said, you know what? I'd like her closer to me. I'd like more racist pigs close to me. And it's just part of this doubling down thing. And certainly that'll play some role in the outcome of this thing. But I don't think we should minimize when we have an extraordinary politician in front of us. That's the case. It happens very rarely that we can look at somebody and say, wow, she's teaching us how to do it.
By the way, just to be fair to me, when I dated Laura Loomer, she wasn't like this. I didn't know she was crazy, like a super racist. But we were young.
Okay, everybody, I was joking. And Pete does this thing where he'll just go along with it no matter what.
It's called improv. I have to.
Yeah, you have to go. You say yes and, right? That's
the rules are if you said, why do you have a pro-Hitler poster in your studio today, I would have to explain why. I wouldn't be like, I don't have that.
That's but somebody out there, somebody out there is going to go, what? Pete did? That's like when somebody came up to me the other day and said, Martin Short and Meryl Streep are having an affair. I was like, what?
I'd fall.
But that turned out maybe to be true.
Is that right? That's amazing. Oh, I hope.
Google it.
Good for them.
Google it.
Just say bye to my mom again, and then I'll let you go.
Mary, your son is a genius. And I come here because I find it not only a joy, but a therapeutic. And I can only assume that it was the job you did raising him that has turned him into such an important leader at such an important time in American history.
Do you think, just real quick on that about me, since we're talking about me, your daughter just won her 7th Emmy as a writer on Last Week Tonight, and she...
6th. It was her 6th.
6th Emmy, but 7 nominations. I mean, her grad school tweeted about her success. That's something. Like when your grad school, Columbia's tweeting about your child.
Yeah. They're not tweeting about my... I went there too, but I dropped out, so they never tweet about me.
Listen, your daughter's so she's won 6 Emmys as a writer on this show. I, of course, am the audience warm-up comedian, the fluffer. And nobody said anything on stage. John didn't mention me. And the show, I feel like I should be given more credit for this win. And your daughter is obviously more important.
Look, I think you're absolutely right. And if they're giving creative arts Emmys out to makeup artists, wig artists, assistant, junior, whatever artists out there, I think there should be an Emmy for Best Fluffer.
I think they should be called the Warmy Awards, the warm-up.
Yeah, but I think get an Emmy. I think you deserve a primetime Emmy.
Yeah.
Look at the John Oliver show that she's on. She's very fortunate to be on. It has won the Emmy for the best show in whatever its category has been, and they've tried to change the category so that it would stop winning for 9 years, 9 straight years. And can you imagine if you went out there and laid an egg? If the audience thought, oh, my God, that guy sucked. I hate this show.
Right.
Where would they be now?
But that's a less likely scenario. I just want to know what you think of how much the energy of the audience matters to the show and its success.
I think it's everything, right?
Yeah, that's all I want.
It's certainly more important than the writing and hosting. I think anybody would say that.
I appreciate that, but I don't know about that. But thank you.
But anyway, I think they should. Let's put it this way. John Oliver won millions of more fans. And I, by the way, and before Joanna was there, I was a huge John Oliver fan.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I think that show is the best.
Me too.
At covering big story, better than the news, but does it with humor. It is an absolute gem in every respect. So John Oliver's won for many years in a row. And this year he came out and he thanked everybody, except you, and he should have thanked you. And then he thanked his dog. And he gave this, he got the music playing him off, and he said, fuck you. And he said, no, I'm going to talk about my dog. And all of America loved him for doing that. And I think after you thank your pet, you should thank your fluffer. And I think this has got to be next.
I think he was about to, and then he got played off.
And then he got played off. But I think next year.
And I want to thank Paul Dominic. Thank you very much for joining me. That was awesome. All right, there you go. David Rothkopf, everybody. Go listen to that acceptance speech of John Oliver's. It was really great. And obviously, I'm teasing. I'm just really honored just to be a very small part of the show. And I won't be there at this taping this week, and I'm easily replaceable. But I will be back next week and hopefully every week after for the rest of the season because I love being a part of that show. And, of course, love when David Rothkopf is a part of this show. Go listen to Deep State Radio. Go subscribe to his Substack. Be like my mom, everybody. Be like Mary. That's all I've got for you today. Tim Wise will join me tomorrow. Awesome conversation with Tim coming your way. But that's it for today. John Carroll taking us out. I hope to see you at the Hangout tonight, everybody. 8 p.m. East. See you there.
Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the face reaching for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says